probably in all fields of design hearing about how AI is going to revolutionize this or change whatever and make designers obsolete, or how it's going to make us all work 10 times faster. So many big claims are happening, but we wanted to see for ourselves, what does that mean? And so for the past year and a half, we've been working very closely with the tools to see how it can impact our work. For anyone who's interested in UX design, the main tool that we use is called Figma. And very recently, they introduced an AI that allows you to actually just create designs for like an app or a website with one click. And we saw that. And at first we were like, yo, what's going on? And then very quickly, it was clear that this isn't going to change much for now. Like this isn't ready for prime time. It's only good for creating first drafts. And so the question became, if the AI is not going to do the work of design, where is it going to fit in our workflow? And for us, that so far seems to be in qualitative UX analysis and in preparing for qualitative research. And so basically, we have been using AI a lot in helping us prepare interview scripts, helping us, analyze interviews and user tests, the qualitative data that comes from that, and also help us with brainstorming and client communication. And so for the most part, it's been an aid for our work in making UX research better for us, faster in some ways, but it's by no means a replacement. And we're not here today to preach it as a replacement. We're here today to show you how it has proven useful in certain areas throughout qualitative UX research, at least for our process.
Totally. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of look under the hood of our studio and how we do things at Pragmatics. And we're going to start with a tool that we use called Notion. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with Notion already, but if you are not familiar with Notion, it's an all-in-one workplace where you can kind of do note-taking, task management, any type of collaboration. It's hyper flexible. It's kind of, like a Google Suite type tool, but really it's a lot more blank canvas, and you can really create some interesting structures of content that really work for our purposes. We typically create client portals in Notion. So here you're looking at Health Ease. This is a demo we created just for the purposes of showing to you guys what a client portal would typically look like in our process. We want to include as much context as possible. So we'll give stuff like product overview. Product overview would typically consist of like a brief. So we'd have a discussion with a client. We'd figure out what their needs are. We figure out what kind of the key features are to develop with the client, and we'd put that all in one place. And oftentimes, if we were doing a call, we might actually use AI to help summarize the key points and then review them to make sure that they're actually accurate. And then below, you'll see a table here. This table consists of a bunch of notes that me and Charlie have taken. So this table is a list of users. You can see Alice, John, Barbara, and these are people that we hypothetically would have interviewed. This is obviously like a demo, and we would take notes on those people, and all of our notes would live in Notion, which would act as our sort of management tool for communication with the client, as well as kind of synthesizing information that we took in the notes. Mm-hmm. So Notion does have a little bit of an AI. We're not going to show off that too much today. It's not something we use. We found that generally speaking, it's good to go with more specific AI. So AI that's very particular to your domain. Notion is a very general purpose tool. And because of that, it has sort of a general purpose AI. So you can use it to query a page. You can use it to summarize a page. You can use it to generate a little bit of content. But in our practice, we haven't found that Notion is particularly useful thus far. Really, tools like ChatGPT, which we'll be diving into, Dovetail, and FigJam is primarily where we use AI. So I think it's worth jumping a little bit into how we use ChatGPT to actually generate the interview questions. And I'm going to let Charlie talk a little bit to that.
Yeah, perfect. So, still in Notion here, we have a testing plan that, we've prepared. Ideally, we've validated this with our client. And so usually we'll know exactly what we're doing. So we're going to be testing with 10 to 15 seniors from the age group 65 plus for our app Health Ease, to focus on seeing how the booking appointments, joining a video call, and viewing medical records works within the application. So at this moment, we're going to start a new chat in ChatGPT. Now, for those of you that pay for ChatGPT, there's a feature called ChatGPT 4.0 with Canvas. So that's the one we're going to be showing off today because it's very impressive in terms of allowing you to edit a document back and forth with the AI. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start writing my prompt. So help me prepare a user interview script to test an app called Health Ease. And then I can go in here, get this handy text and say the user base is, and then paste that in there. And then go back here and the sessions will focus on. So obviously I need this. And I'll come in there and say sessions will focus on key tasks such as booking an appointment, joining a video call, and viewing medical records. So now that my prompt is in place and I have ChatGPT 4.0 with Canvas activated, I can hit send and ChatGPT will get started and then it'll create a document. So this might be a unique UI for those of you that don't pay or have not seen this before. And it'll actually start by giving me a breakdown of the interview script that it's written for me. Now, I do not recommend by any means that you take this interview script and you go out and interview users with it, right? Like, again, this is not a call where we're saying, let the AI do the work for you. Instead, we're getting rid of this like blank page syndrome. There might be some stuff here that we want to just get started with. And the next step usually is we'll start to go in and review this. With this Canvas feature, what's been really cool is we're able to select specific questions and actually like edit them on the spot. So for example, it says here, do you use any apps for managing your health or communicating with doctors? But this is a kind of a closed question, right? So I can highlight this question and say, make this an open question to invite users to list out the apps. And then when I do that, it can take that and replace it. Now, this is an obvious example. But what's really interesting is I can continue reading. For example, if you could change one thing to make this app easier for you to use, what would it be? And then I can come in here and do that and say next question, for example. And if I select this, I can go add a question that asks about the pain points. And it'll replace that. What are the most challenging or frustrating parts? Now, what's really cool about this, and if you want to get really creative with it, is you can say, you can ask it to generate 3 more creative questions that will encourage someone who is shy to speak more. So let's say we are anticipating that maybe these people don't want to talk too much. We're worried that we might have some shy people. And so this is where things can get really interesting. And we can start to see, okay, like it's giving us these questions. One thing that's really powerful as well is you can explain why you wrote this question. And so we can actually learn from it why it's doing that. And that's really helpful for us on a metacognitive level, right? We're able to not only generate questions, but also understand the reason behind those questions being generated. And then if I disagree with this, I can actually push back and start to generate more or less questions in that sense.
Totally. And I would just add also, like when we were, the initial prompt here, you can really add as much context as possible. So kind of harking back to the notion, like if you have that client call where you got all the different product specifications, this is stuff that you can really just stuff into that initial prompt or in general feed into the conversation to try and get slightly richer questions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then I want to just stress like the analysis part is really interesting. So for example, you can start to do things like, if I am short on time, what would be the best 3 questions to focus on and why? And so if I do that, I can actually get something like this. And this is useful. And I think we've actually used a feature like this before when we had a script prepared and then we found out last minute that a client was only going to, a user only had 30 minutes. And so we were able to very quickly cut down. Again, you have to take everything it says with a grain of salt, which is why I said the why, because I want to focus on that. But it could have also been, give me the 3 questions from this script that focus on the booking only. And that would be another way to start to play around with those interviews. So all this is about having a sounding board, being able to be more creative, challenging yourself, and how you think about the approach that you're going to be taking with these interviews. And then what we typically do is we'll copy these questions out of here. We'll go into Notion, and then we'll open up our user test questions and we'll put that in here. So this is the questions that we kind of collaborated with ChatGPT on. So usually we'll keep some questions from there and then write our own.
Yeah, I think it's also good to note that we don't keep a lot of them.
It depends, right?
Depends, but I'd say like when ChatGPT is great, maybe we get like 50% of the questions are amazing quality questions. When it's not, I'd say maybe closer to 20 to 30% are amazing questions. So just to note.
Yeah, its biggest flaws are in its repetition. So it loves to like ask the same question in different ways, and so sometimes you have to like pay attention to that. But it's again the biggest unblock for us is in the blank page.
Yeah.
So we're not coming to a blank page and starting from scratch or downloading some generic template off the internet. We can actually put a lot of context in here and get something very helpful. So once these things are in Notion, we can go out and start doing our interviews. And so that's when we usually will start a Zoom session. We'll record the call on the Zoom with our customer, with the user, and then they get recorded, and the transcription happens in a tool called Dovetail.
So just to talk a little bit about Dovetail, has anyone heard of Dovetail? Just quickly in the chat, I want to kind of see a show of hands, maybe also. Let's see here, check the chat. Yeah, okay, cool. So Dovetail has been around for a while. It's sort of, for us, the foremost user research tool. It's basically a tool that allows you to record your interviews, analyze your interviews, and kind of create synthesis and insight. And the way you would typically do that is you would, go into Dovetail, you'd set up your highlights. So highlights are kind of key things that you want to focus on when thinking about an interview. Some examples could be, okay, maybe, for example, in the context of a user test within our own domain, feature requests could be something that someone mentions during a call. Error preventions could be something that someone mentions during a call. Oh, something that's easy to learn. These are all sort of tags that you set up prior to the interview, and you anticipate what a user might be discussing and things that are important for you to record. So once you've done that process of figuring out what are the things that are important for you to highlight, you can actually go through and start highlighting those things in a user test. So we can kind of quickly jump to one of our users here.
There's a question actually.
Oh, there's a question.
Have you compared Dovetail with Copilot? So do you mean the Copilot like the GitHub and the coding one, or the Copilot that's built into Office?
And feel free also to talk. You can say...
Sorry, I mean the Copilot that is built into Office. We're using like the Pro version, and like we get amazing recap of our meetings and transcript, and it's really powerful. Actually, like almost scary powerful. So I'm wondering, like, if like I see it using it with Zoom, or like is Dovetail working with all the space, like with Microsoft 365 as well? And my question was, because we're using Copilot right now, like, have you seen a difference between using Dovetail and Copilot in terms of the quality of the feedback and the recap that it can do?
So Dovetail does a lot more than recaps, and that's actually what we're going to jump into. So I would imagine the recaps are quite similar, mostly because all these companies are using one of 2 or 3 models. It's either Facebook's Llama, Claude, or GPT-4. So most likely the summaries will be quite similar, but what Copilot can't do, at least not to my knowledge, and we're not on Office, so I don't have updated knowledge on that, is the stuff that Allan's going to show with the coding and the highlighting.
It's really about kind of structuring the information. Once you have that raw data, like creating highlights and doing analysis becomes a lot easier using a tool like Dovetail. So it's about going through the scripts as they are, not actually summarizing the information, and looking for kind of moments of insight. Typically we will record, here I think we have like 10 interviews. We'll record the 10 interviews. We'll click into the interview. So this is kind of how we would do it in the past. Let's say we'll click into Dorothy. We'll kind of read through the transcription, and we'll start highlighting key areas that we think are interesting based off the highlights we created. So let's say Dorothy S says, the question is, how often do you use telehealth? And Dorothy says, not very often. I try, but it's usually too complicated. So in this context, we've made this health app demo. It's an older demographic, so they might be struggling with certain issues around technology, especially Dorothy here, who's 80 years old. And we'll start to go through the kind of whole interview, and me and Charlie would typically take the time to actually go through and label everything with different tags here. And what Dovetail did, which is quite interesting, I think it's about 3 weeks ago, they launched Dovetail 3.0. And what Dovetail is doing, this tool existed prior to AI. What Dovetail is doing is it's integrating AI very heavily and allowing for certain things like suggest highlights. So you would have gone and created all of those highlights, like I mentioned before, the error prevention, the feature requests, the ease of use, and then you'll click suggest. And based off the tags that you've previously inputted, the Dovetail AI will actually go through and start tagging your interview for you. So it'll find key areas of insight for you to then go through and review. And you can do this to all of your interviews, right? So this was typically a manual process. Me and Charlie previously did a contract for the Ontario government where we had to do 50 interviews. And finding all that information out of 50 interviews is quite a time-intensive process. And the Dovetail AI really shines here. Again, like we've been saying since the beginning of the call, it's important for you to then go through and actually accept or review the different highlights it's made. The point is to just speed up the time for you to be able to find the different highlights and tags, but not completely rely on Dovetail here to kind of find the things for you. And one interesting thing is Dovetail, and maybe they'll release this later, but the way that Dovetail works is you kind of find the highlights and you generate insights from it. The highlight process is automated, so you can go through and highlight using the AI. But the insight process, which is the process of collecting a bunch of different highlights together, has not yet been automated by the AI. And maybe they're planning on doing that, maybe they're not. But there's a kind of moment of human intervention where you have to go through and collect all of the different tags from all of the different interviews and put them into one insight. And that's still a very manual process that requires your own kind of creative thinking.
For what it's worth, Guillaume, there is also here like a summarize feature, for example, like if that's the thing that you're looking for. And so this works, like I said, pretty well. It's very comparable to the summaries I've seen in Notion and many other tools. But the highlighting thing, what's really cool about this, in addition to like cutting time, is sometimes it's fun to run it once you've highlighted everything already and see if maybe you've missed something or if it interprets something in a different way to you. So one sort of general theme for us is it's not that it's faster intelligence, like, artificial intelligence. What's artificial about it? Is it that it's faster? Is it that it's, better? I think it's just different. And I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. And so sometimes, it's automatically tagging here, like this is a negative point. But if we look at some of the other interviews, for example, like with this one, it's found some more positives, for example, and maybe some of these positives I wouldn't have thought of as a positive. We've seen that before in another like in another what's it called, interview session that we've done, where like I'll maybe have either missed something or not interpreted something as positive necessarily just because of my own bias, perhaps. And so it's interesting to compare with it sometimes, especially for these more gray zone, like nebulous processes for the highlighting. But yeah, the summaries are in there. So I don't think I would necessarily recommend this tool for like your everyday meetings with people, right? For that, probably just use Copilot because it's integrated into your toolkit.
Yeah, there's many tools like that. There's Otter and a few others. And one thing also to know. Sorry, you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah. So you're mostly using it to basically, it's easier for the human being to just say yes or no. Like, I like that. I don't like that. Like, even like explain why. I don't know, but yes, it's good. No, it's not good. So you're using the AI to generate a bunch of potential items that once they are highlighted, you tell them, yes, that was a good one. No, that one's not a good one. Instead of having to search through it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a good analogy would be like you kind of become like a bit more of a director. So it's like, okay, you cut all these insights, they come to you, and then you can say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. But throughout the process of saying yes, no, you're also learning, which I think is important. It's not a question of just saying, okay, yes, I accept this as is, or no. It's not that binary. Sometimes it'll come up with insights, be like, oh, I honestly hadn't thought of that way, and it's not exactly the right answer, but this is leading me to a future insight or a different way of approaching the problem. And I think that's one thing that we also want to highlight in general with our workshops whenever we're talking about AI is like these are tools for facilitating thought, not just kind of execution of yes, no, yes, no. That definitely in this context, like we're approving, not approving, but through that process, ideally, there's some learning and there's some abstract thinking that we're using the tool to help guide.
I just want to quickly surface on the chat. We had a quick exchange. So someone asked if we had to train it on the tags. The answer is no. It automatically does that.
Yeah.
So in case anyone has missed out on the chat, that's what's happening there. And then I don't want to harp on the Dovetail too much, but one last thing is, in addition to like approving and not approving, one thing that's sort of been impactful is the reality that it might miss some stuff, but there are time constraints. And so if it makes you do a job that's like 80% as good in a context where otherwise you maybe couldn't even analyze some of the interviews due to a time crunch or due to whatever, issues, there's a trade-off there that some of us sometimes aren't talking about, where it's not so much that this AI is better than me, but it has more time than me. And so there are certain cases where I can use the summary feature, I can use the highlights feature here. And if I only get two things, maybe this interview is a dud. And so I can move on and look at another interview where it came up with more stuff. And so then I can choose where to focus my attention and rely on the AI to analyze the interviews that maybe weren't as interesting. For anyone here that's conducted user tests, sometimes you leave one and you're like, that person just didn't say anything interesting, right? Like they weren't saying insightful stuff. Maybe they're not a common user of the application. And so I don't want to go in and code that. Yeah. So it's much easier for me to just like highlight all the stuff in there. I'm not saying that, it's good to ignore them, but there are realities of, professional work and time that sometimes the AI can be a real boon for those areas.
And I think the last thing that I want to highlight is that as these interviews are being conducted as well, me and Charlie are both taking notes.
Yes.
It's not going to be always the case that both Charlie and I are on the calls. Ideally, in any user research context, you have a note taker and you have the interviewer. And I feel like these things like the Copilot you mentioned, the Microsoft and like Otter, there's kind of an attempt to sort of take over that note taker job. But in the context of user interviews, the note taker can really provide a lot of additional benefit because they're not just transcribing, they're trying to find key points. And if your note taker has, a background in user research, like both Charlie and I do, they can go in and actually add notes that are particularly useful. Do we want to show off the Notion AI at all?
I think, yeah. So like just an example here, we have the Alice M transcription that's now been coded and highlighted. And then on the left, we have the way Allan and I will usually work is I'll have Charlie's notes up here, and then we'll have Allan's notes here. And if I split these up again, so I go back into just Notion, we can see like sometimes we interview together, sometimes Allan or I will interview alone. It depends on our availability. But because we have them all in a table, I can go into Notion and create a new column, and I do AI summary. And let's try on this view. So let's just close this, and there we go, wrap column. And now we can see that it went into each of those and pulled out the summaries of each of our notes. These are different from the interview transcriptions. And so that's like another thing is you have your notes, you have the transcription, and then we can summarize all of them at a high level on the table because we have all the notes inside of the table here.
Yeah, and this type of AI usage might not be really used in the context of like mining insights, but we might use it in the context of client communication more so than actually like finding good insights.
In some cases, like not for these projects, but in other projects, you can like just copy all of this stuff And then like if we go into ChatGPT, let's turn off the canvas this time. We can even go like, what are the common themes across these notes, right? And then just paste it. And then we will get that, right? And then maybe now I'm just like showing off something that just came out, but like the ChatGPT recently added a web search. And so now I can actually like click on this and go like, find me resources that explain in a professional, like that explain solutions to these problems. And now it'll go take that context and then actually get me links because I have the web search on, and I can go and read these, or maybe even prepare documents. So like when Allan and I do like audits, we'll sometimes prepare documents for our clients so they can like educate themselves on design a little bit. We love to make sure that our clients feel included in that process. And so as a result, we can go and get resources super quickly, but also extremely contextual. There is no way to search like this on Google. Like that's just not possible. And so this is really great. I can click on this and, you know, I can get some resources on senior friendly and age friendly accessibility. Like, look at how specific that is. Yeah. It would have taken forever to, you know, get to that level of specificity across the board on every single thing that we looked up.
Cool. So I think the next, so we've talked about ChatGPT a little bit, which we really use for interview generation, for helping us create good questions as a kind of sounding board, especially when you're a solo interviewer and trying to kind of extract insight. We've talked a little bit about Dovetail, which we really use for synthesis, finding out a little bit more about the user interviews by tagging, auto tagging, and kind of ideally generating some insights that we can action then in the design side. And I think the last tool we really kind of want to highlight today is FigJam. So I'll pass it over to Charlie to talk a little bit more about FigJam.
Yeah. So is anyone familiar with FigJam? It's the whiteboard from Figma, basically. So it's like MIRO, honestly, except it's very fast. So it's a lot of fun to work in FigJam. Like MIRO, it has sticky notes. You can generate shapes, you know, obviously scribble. But the way we like to use it is in cases like this, we will go here and grab, like this is the client's app, the medical booking app. And because it's all in the same tool, you can actually grab the screenshots from here, copy them, and bring them into FigJam. And then we'll usually sit with our clients and start to annotate some of the stuff like, oh, we learned that, you know, the back button isn't clear, right? We might say that what's it called? Like the time slots weren't big enough or whatever, stuff like this. And so we'll sit here and we'll put in all these sticky notes in FigJam, and you will usually end up with something that looks a little bit like this. So we have all our screens. The stickies are a mix of mine, Allan's, and sometimes even the clients. We like to open up these boards and make them these collaborative spaces. But often we'll end up with a mess. So this is only one flow. Now imagine that we tested several of these flows. And so we end up with like this, but like several times over. So we'll end up with a lot of sticky notes that we have to parse. And once again, this is where FigJam has some really interesting features. For starters, I can select all of these sticky notes, and the classic one is summarize. I think at this point, we're all bored of summaries, right? Like, yes, it can summarize stuff, you know. And the use of these is for meeting notes at the end. We can send these to the client. But one thing that you can do on a whiteboard that maybe isn't as easy to do in a GPT or in a chat interface is this: sort stickies by topic. And so when I click on that, it'll analyze them all and start to categorize things by topic. So we have accessibility improvements over here, booking experiences over here, and feedback mechanisms over here. Now, you know, we've already shown topic and analysis on Dovetail. What's the difference between that and this? For starters, in this one, we're working together with the client and we're putting sticky notes of ideas, insights, you know, questions. So it's no longer just about, you know, like finding the interview quotes that match the tags, but now we're in a generative process with the client. And so in some cases, it's good to see where the client left many stickies. In this particular case, obviously, we can see that accessibility is the biggest area for improvement. And granted, that was an area of focus for the testing, so it's kind of natural that would emerge. But when you have a lot more stickies than this, you'll start to see sometimes different patterns emerging. And using it like this is, once again, an aid for thinking. It's a way to, at a glance, see what areas are being highlighted as major. So feedback mechanisms, or like leaving feedback to the user or on the app, seems to be a less important area than, let's say, enhancing the booking experience. And for us, that's like, okay, so maybe that's a way to help us think about where we focus our attention. And so we can go from there and start working on that. I will show off one other small feature on FigJam, although we don't use it too much, the Jam bot.
Yeah.
But it's very impressive from a interface perspective. So let's say here, it says, simplify the booking user with low tech, minimize on-screen options, avoid confusion. Okay, so I can take the sticky note out, and Figma has created a really interesting bot where I can connect this to this machine, and I can click on ideate. And so what it'll do is it'll take that sticky note and then actually give me ideas that I can work on, but in a very visual manner. And what you're not maybe appreciating here is if there's multiple players on this FigJam file, they will actually see this. So it's almost like, remember in high school, we would like show our work in math. You would show like where you added, divided, all that stuff. It's almost like showing your work in the AI. And so if there's a specific idea I like here, for example, utilize or provide a book now button that directly initiates with minimal additional inputs required, I can then take this, connect it to that one up here, and then click on similar stuff. And I have a paper trail of ways of like how my ideation went. So again, this is good for generative. We almost never take any of these and like run with it, but it's a good way to sort of get like lots of ideas going, which is the point of these whiteboards. And for working with your clients or stakeholders, they get to see your thought process step by step. So that's something, again, it's more of a generative ideation toy than it is like for serious work, but it's one of the ways that we are experimenting with, how do we ideate? How do we discover new things in this process?
Oh, we have a question as well. From your experience, how accurate is it? I've tried clustering in other tools and I've always had to redo it.
Yes. So we always have to redo it as well. If what we're going for is like really unique insights. So you'll see here, for example, our categories are things like accessibility improvements, enhancing booking experience, and feedback mechanisms. But those are very like basic, like it's the most high level version of categorization. And so it's not giving us like real insights on the different, for example, improving button size to accommodate for motor impairments, tremors. And so now we're like, okay, so it's not just about accessibility broadly speaking, but we want here like maybe a category that's like more about like finger, or like the tap zones on the buttons, right? Like that would be something a human would think to do more so than an AI. So there's an unfortunate gap. There are ways you can force it. Like if we were to take all these sticky notes like this, and then go to ChatGPT and start a new chat, paste them all in here, and then say across all these ideas, categorize them by specific types of motor, of accessibility needs. So this will actually be a lot clearer. So there's a question for us, which is, why has FigJam not yet added that feature? So what we're hoping for is in the future, when you select these sticky notes and you go to organize, instead of just by topic, it allows us to add an additional prompt that forces categorization. And that's going to be the real, I think, breakthrough.
Yeah, like imagine how, like in Dovetail, when you could go create the different tag categories, could you do the same in something like FigJam to help categorize further with these tools?
Yeah. So that's, yeah, you're right, Diana. Like it's not like ready for prime time on the categorization level. We use it loosely, like when we teach. This is not exactly qualitative research, but when we're teaching and the students put a lot of sticky notes on the board in the middle of class, if I'm facilitating, it's super useful because like I have no time to like see maybe what areas of interest the students have. But yes, for qualitative research, it's a lot more powerful to force a prompt in like something like ChatGPT than it is to use that here if you want anything more than the most surface level categorization.
In some ways, I mean, there's some things like a context we've used it in the past is when we're creating kind of different, like for example, feature options. So a flow of screens, we get the client feedback, we kind of categorize things, and then we create a summary, and then basically we have bullet points for what to do next. And not only do we have bullet points for what to do next, but now we know what we focused on in the past. And I think that's also like Charlie was mentioning about kind of having a tree of thought here on the bottom. You also have really great ways of kind of looking back on what's been done to this point, what you've done in the past, and kind of, you know, that way the client, I think one of the things we've learned is that AI has really enhanced client communication. And that's really one of the biggest areas that we use it, you know, for summaries. We're not going to talk much about this tool today, but we use Loom for kind of sending over client reviews and not client reviews, sorry, client updates around, you know, when we've done a project. We'll record a video talking through the project and we'll send that over to the client. Loom also just recently integrated AI and really helps, you know, synthesize the information in the video in a clear way. And if there are action points that we need to actually address, it will give you those as well. And that's been extremely helpful from a communication perspective. So I think one of the things, you know, we've mentioned this honestly throughout our discussion is these tools are really amazing, but they don't really replace the user researcher. I think what we found is that these tools are great for first drafts. They're great for creating a dialogue. I think that AI tools should really be used almost as a sounding board because it's basically a partner who never gets tired of hearing what you have to say, never gets tired of you asking certain questions. You can just ask and ask away, really explore your curiosity. But it's the exploration that matters most. And it's the kind of collaboration between the human and machine that generates the richest results. I think one thing that we've noticed when using these tools is because we're experts in user research, when we use the user research AI, we were able to really get results that we're happy with. But if you were to just jump in and not really consider that, you know, there's multiple points of failure, right? So if you were to use ChatGPT to generate the scripts, that's one point of failure with the AI. Then you go into Dovetail. And you use the AI to generate the tags. That's another point of failure. And if you bring those insights into, let's say, FigJam, and again, try and analyze those tools, you've done 3 different analyses through models that sometimes are obscure, and you might miss some really critical information. So these tools are meant to synthesize information and process and chunk information for you then to go back and review in depth and kind of, you know, harken back to your own expertise and your own judgment to kind of go through and analyze them, at least at this stage.
I think we have like 15 minutes left, so I think it'll be fun to maybe open it up to questions, or if anyone wants to like ask us to like poke and prod on specific things, we can do like a collaborative session. That's interesting. Yeah.
I did have one question for the crowd also.
Sure.
Quickly. I studied a little bit of industrial design school, but that has nothing to do with the workplace. And I was wondering, how often are you guys actually conducting interviews with the stakeholders who end up using the end product? Feel free to kind of answer the questions in the chat. I've had conversations with product, like industrial designers in the past who have, okay, every 2 weeks. Wow. Okay. Almost every project.
Rare. Yeah. It's a mix, I guess, like in UX.
And what tools are you guys using? If any. Notion. Okay, interesting. So there's a lot of, okay, cool.
Actually, I have a question regarding Notion, if I may. You know, Notion has evolved a lot in the past years. On our business, we've used it for the past like 5 or 6 years, I think, well, since the beginning of Notion.
Yeah.
So as the business grew and Notion evolved, we have a lot of artifacts and old kind of organization, like nose families and stuff like that are unuseful anymore. What do you think about the new templates for project, for example, and task management and stuff like that, and also all the AI function built in Notion? I was just curious to have your insight on this. And
yeah, I think also Notion like this week just went crazy with or last week with the big updates. So now there's like forms and the email calendar. I think we tried using task management in Notion, and then we went to linear. Because you at some point you start to feel more like a DevOps engineer than an actual like product manager or designer, because you have to actually engineer the tool.
Yeah.
And then if ever there's a feature missing, you have to build it. So it's for in the right context, I think it can be very powerful. And so like, for example, this particular case, we want a tool that's both note-taking, but also can be a client portal. We don't want to code a client portal, right? So for those areas, it worked for us, but unfortunately, it's never proven to be like a one. Like I've not many people that actually only have Notion. Most people end up having a Drive anyway. They end up having either Jira or Linear anyway. So I don't know what it'll take to change that, but for us, I think it's kind of the same thing. So I'm not. It's like it can be powerful, but I think you have to use it with some caution to avoid bogging down, especially if you have a big team and people have to retrain on it. And you can break things in Notion quite easily.
Yeah, I think that's another thing we've seen is like it is a new tool. Things are very easily breakable. So as soon as you start to add people to the team, you can and they start to build. You're kind of building a house of
Cards.
That's what. What's a weird thing? A house of cards, because even then there are new features. So we really try and use it in like the most kind of basic, dumb way possible, so that as we build out, we're not dependent on Notion if they make any changes.
Yeah.
We just use like a table, some basic stuff. Sometimes we'll connect the table, and we tried doing like a client management portal just to track outreach and stuff like that. But there are really amazing tools that are specifically designed for those things, and Notion really for us really feels great for note taking and storing information.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it is such a nice sandbox, but at the same time, everybody can make their own different sandcastle. So even if you're working as a team, you will open different project folders, and they're all set up differently. Totally. So as a project manager, it's pretty hard sometimes to follow on project and task management for your team.
Totally.
But I still love it anyway. But
we love it too. We pay for it. But it's just we've learned to not force using it for everything. So for a while, we were resistant to use another task manager, and then it's we just have to. And so that's okay.
And we're also at the behest of clients, right?
Yes, exactly.
We've seen in the past
we have to align to their
exactly. We've seen in the past certain people kind of try and force Notion, because they're like everybody loves Notion who loves Notion. But at the end of the day, clients are often working in Microsoft Office or working in the Google Suite. So you have to adapt to their needs. Any other questions? We're here to answer anything you want to ask. And feel free to type it in the chat or just say it out loud.
We can even revise something, or if you want us to do some live prompting in ChatGPT, if you're curious about it and you don't have a paid account.
Well, if I may, then again,
please.
If there are no other questions. Did you have the chance to did you get the chance to try maybe the AI functions of MIRO? Because I'm starting to see some commercials about MIRO, implementing AI and so on. So compared to, Figma, of course, is really a design. Well, it's at its core, it's a design software, but MIRO is more like a whiteboard and stuff like that. So I was wondering if you had the chance to try it out.
No, we don't pay for MIRO, and none of our clients use it. They're usually in our FigJams, so we haven't tried the new stuff. But I know that the vision they're selling is that a bit like Notion, they're trying to make the whiteboard like a project management tool. But We haven't paid or tried it yet.
Yeah, I think with like UI UX designers and researchers, oftentimes you'll find that they lean towards FigJam because Figma is such a big player in the space. Whereas we've seen like service designers and some industrial designers use Miro because you're not using Figma typically.
I think
So
everyone else usually uses Miro.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
even Miro's like the one that everyone knows, and then people who use Figma will use FigJam because the seats come with it, and so yeah.
But I'll check it out actually. I do want to see how the AI kind of, compares.
Yeah.
And as a collaborative tool with your clients, do you think that they find it easy to, for example, do they have to create an account to open your Figma file and comment, or can they just jump in like as a guest, sort of?
Yeah, guest when possible. And so there's like something called there's something called an open session. So when you do this, you can start an open session, and then for 24 hours, it removes any need for an account, and they get like full access, not just commenting. And then if we need to add anyone, usually just the email, and we'll make them like only commenters. And I haven't found that people find that difficult usually.
No. I mean, the nice thing about FigJam is if you look at the bottom toolbar here, it's such a limited tool set. So we found that in terms of client education, it's very easy for them to be like, hey, look, if you want to scribble something, there's a pencil tool. If you want to add a note, just click on the note and you'll add it. And then that's all they really need to know. So it's very amenable to clients and requires very little explanation. And because it's so tactile, especially when you have a large group of either clients or students in our case, it's very powerful and starts to feel like you're actually in this open space, which is quite nice. Any other questions?
Well, then I'll jump in again if there's no other questions.
There's a question in the chat.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, nothing.
3D, no.
No, unfortunately not.
I don't think there's even a feature for it.
No. There's no 3D modeling in Figma. I think there's like some plugins that allow you to do 3D renders of screens, but it's very not friendly for modeling tools in general.
Sorry, guys. I wanted to say not 3D on AI, but let's say you've got a special object, a car, and when you add the user interface, because what I understood is that you work a lot on let's say application on like
yes.
But I wanted to say, there's another area where you can mix the app application with the UX, meaning let's say motorcycle, snowmobile.
Sure.
Totally.
Just wanted to know if you had the chance to work a bit on it.
With Hydro?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. So when in Hydro Quebec, I can't give many details on the project, but yes, there was some like manipulation of like hardware through UI. But we still use Figma for that actually. And then what we would do is we would either find a way to get the images onto the device if that was possible, and if not, we would have to try and work with the imagination a little bit. So maybe if we're doing a user test, so for example, in this particular case, we went to the manufacturing area that the UI was supposed to be used in, and we put the laptop next to the actual device that the UI would be on. It's not obviously like great, but the advantage was the technician could look at the UI on this side and then like move and work on the machinery when they wanted to like explain to us the difference between the two things. So there are ways that we try and do testing like that. But I would say it's not been something that we've had many opportunities. We tended to work a lot with iPads, laptops, things like that, and not so much like cars or even like thermostats or other objects.
But there should be some opportunities for you to develop that,
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's super fun when we get a chance to work on those types of projects. You know, I think it's something that we'd probably be quite comfortable doing at this stage in our careers. So, yeah, those type of projects are very cool to work on for sure. We've done games, for example. You know, we've kind of stretched the ability of what Figma can do with games and prototyping, and kind of trying to build out different experiences that are not typically all done in Figma. Our largest client right now is a education tool that works in schools to teach kids how to read, and we built that all through Figma. Obviously, it's like then developed and pushed out through Unity, but Unity doesn't port one-to-one with Figma. So there's not like a, you know, Figma is built for kind of applications. And
it connects to anything really that
Unity
way.
does not connect into
No,
that.
even Figma.
Oh no.
I don't know. I don't know if you can like put it into Rhino.
No,
or
totally. But
probably
just like
not,
the inspector and maybe dev mode is a bit more friendly to things that aren't Unity, unfortunately. Yet, though I think that's got to happen at some point soon.
Okay, pretty cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then Frederic shared a tool called VisCom that looks really interesting. So basically, the idea is that you can draw in your notebook and then it converts it into a 3D model with AI. Huh. Yeah, amazing. I mean, the stuff that's going on right now is insane. It's actually like, if anyone's really interested, there's the Neuron. This is the newsletter I read every day. And it has all the AI tools that are coming out across the board. I don't know how the hell they do it, but every single day, and it's a daily newsletter, there are at least 15 AI tools that are shared in this newsletter. So I've been discovering a lot of this stuff from here. So if anyone's interested, I'll share the link in the chat as well. So you guys can subscribe if you want to keep up with all things AI. I found this to be honestly one of the best, just for keeping up with links.
I think one thing that we want to highlight just in closing out is, you know, we think that there's like a lot of opportunity with these tools, and out of necessity, we've learned how to use them. But really, you know, there are a lot of things to consider when using AI, from ethical considerations, like the environmental impact is pretty significant and pretty severe. So whenever we use these tools, we should think about that. Also, biases, like we're talking about user research here. That's a very, very rich domain to create biases unintentionally. Like, you know, let's say the example we always use, like if you say, okay, I want to interview someone who's studying math, the questions will automatically be kind of geared towards a male. So this is kind of highlights the importance of whenever you're using an AI tool, it's there to facilitate thinking, and then you have to review it in order to really get the richness out of it. Otherwise, you might really miss some things that end up hurting the final user. So I just want to highlight that. It's something that we always mention in our classes, in our workshops. AI is an amazing tool for thought. It's a very cool tool. It seems like creativity is being unlocked through it, but we just have to be kind of cautious with how we use these tools, because it comes with a cost. And I think
Cool.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you so much. I'm looking at the time. I'm gonna do like a applause. emoji applause. Thank you so much. It was great. I'm gonna put in the link here, feedback form. I would really appreciate it. We'll share with our speakers. It's always helpful for them so they can always improve. It's going to take 1 second and then I'll be done. I'm also going to send you an email after with all of the links that they discussed during the session as well. So thank you so much. Thank you again, Charlie and Allan, for sharing your knowledge with our community.
No problem.
And thank you, everyone. I hope to see you both, well, not both, all of you in our next masterclass, which we'll be announcing in the next week.
Perfect.
Amazing.
Thanks, guys. Take
Thank
it
you all
easy.
so much.
Have a good rest of your day.